Hey, coming to you from beautiful BC and somewhere down the States, this is Left of the Valley 2.0. My name is Kevin, and it blows my mind that NASA is able to receive data from 4.67 million miles away, but somehow I lose Wi-Fi in my kitchen. What's the deal with that? Joining me today, we got a full panel, pretty much. We got the amazing Christine. Hi, Christine. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
She didn't mute her mic. Awesome.
I'm learning.
Cosmic Kyle. Hey, Kyle. How you doing, bud?
Doing pretty good, Kevin. How are you?
Good, good. And trial by fire for Troy. First time try you, Troy. How you doing, buddy? You muted.
Oh, he failed right from the start.
You muted your mic. Yeah,
Rookie mistake.
We couldn't hear you. You're muted.
Guys, we're gonna have a great show today because we have probably the master of arguing. He's a master arguer. Is that the way you say it? I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. But we're going to be talking about street epistemology with Anthony Magnabosco. Anthony, thank you so much for being back on the show.
Thanks for having me on again. I think this is... Oh, you're going to pause.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Second or third time? I think I've been on... I think this is my third time by my count.
I think so. It's been a while, though. It's been too long, my friend. How have you been?
Yeah. I've been very, very busy. Very busy, but it's been good. It's been really rewarding getting into the whole street epistemology stuff.
Excellent. Well, maybe for those people that have missed a couple of shows that you were on, maybe you'd be so kind to give them a quick bio of who Anthony Magnabosco is.
Well, let's see. I'm married. I've got two kids who have just moved out of the house. They're both at university now, which is kind of nice, I gotta say.
That's worth an applause.
There you go. And everyone says, when are you getting a dog? We're not going to get a dog. No dogs are forthcoming as far as I know. But I've been busy, doing the whole street epistemology thing since 2013. So it's almost about 3 years now where I read Dr. Peter Boghossian's book. I started going out and recording talks, practicing and promoting it, doing interviews. And then in 2019, we started a nonprofit organization called Street Epistemology International. And that's been occupying a lot of my time. But I love it. It's a very rewarding thing to be a part of. Excellent.
So today we're going to be talking about street epistemology, and I guess the first question comes from one of our watchers that's watching right now. It says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how sure is this going to be a good show?
9.
Oh, fantastic!
I like the odds.
Thank you for the question, Nico. So, what exactly is street epistemology?
Street epistemology, I'll probably just abbreviate and call it SE, is a way of approaching a claim that somebody makes differently, where you're not arguing or debating with them. You're inviting them to explore their reasoning with how they got there. That's essentially what it is. It's taking your ego out of it. It's taking your desire to change their mind out of it as much as you can. And sometimes you can't always set that aside, especially if they say something that you're sure that they're wrong and you just want to just change their mind. But it's a way of engaging with a person where they're largely doing all the work. You're asking lots of questions and you're inviting them to explore their reasoning on how they concluded that their belief is true. How do they determine that they have really good reasons for being so sure that their claim is factually true? That's essentially what it is. Yeah. But it's not easy to do. A lot of people struggle with it. A lot of people slip back to wanting to argue or give people facts. But if you stick with it, it'll probably be one of the best conversations you've ever had, and maybe even the best conversation that they've ever had about that topic.
It is very difficult when somebody makes a mistake. Like I had an argument very recently, with somebody that was arguing that COVID was less dangerous than the flu. It's very hard to not say, no, look, let's pull up the numbers right here on my phone. Here are the numbers. But you're saying this is the wrong kind of approach to have to change somebody's mind.
You could get lucky and give people facts or numbers that will show that they're mistaken, because it happens to us occasionally, right? We read an article, we accept the numbers, but if you're already committed to thinking the opposite, and then you're presented with facts to show that you're wrong, especially if you're really tied to the belief, then it usually tends to kind of bounce off of a person. They don't usually accept it. They might hear what you're saying, but they usually don't allow it to change their confidence in their position. And that's what gets so frustrating about it, is like, you would think if I just tell people the facts, they're going to change their mind, but it rarely works. You have to try a different approach.
Would this with these people, that is it in your experience that these people that when they're presented the facts and they reject the facts, do they have a tendency to question the facts themselves or the source of the facts?
Not usually. No, what will usually happen is they will question the facts themselves and where you got the facts and why you're giving them the facts. Unless they discover it on their own, giving them this information is probably not going to work. Unless they trust you and they see you as an authority figure, then you're probably in good shape. But if they see you as an opponent and then you're giving them facts, they probably won't take it very seriously. And like I said, you might get lucky. Maybe they would accept it. What's way more useful is to ask them how they became convinced and have them talk you through their reasoning. And they may show you the facts that they used, and then you can explore how they determined that those are good facts. That's far more effective, it seems, than just trying to dump people facts to show that they're mistaken on something.
That's interesting, because I always get the impression that whenever I'm talking to somebody, and especially somebody who's like in right-wing politics, for example, I get the impression that their facts, they don't really care about facts. They're just repeating water cooler talk. They just have to agree with. They just happen to agree with. They don't really have any facts on it, and you could tell because they'll be the first one to say, "Well, look it up. Do some research. Do your own research." Right? You hear this all the time. How do you tackle that?
The way that you tackle it is to approach it by, I guess, giving them the benefit of the doubt for the first thing. Because when you run into somebody, yes, very often they say that they have good evidence to back up their position. They have the facts, but when you probe a little bit, you realize they don't. But that's still useful. Like that can get really discouraging and frustrating, and you just sort of chalk them up to being, a dogmatic dummy or something. But it's far better to help them discover that their position is not being based on facts at all. So if you ask questions and you start peeling back the layers of their reasoning, what tends to happen is they admit to themselves and possibly to you that they are not basing it on facts, or they're basing it on something else. Usually, well, it feels good to believe that this is the case, or well, everyone else in my tribe says that this is the situation, so I affiliate with my tribe, and that's good enough for me.
Mm.
There's usually psychosocial motivations behind people's deeply held beliefs, not facts. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody to learn that somebody isn't basing their position on any facts. You should almost expect it, but give them the benefit of the doubt because maybe they did do a little bit of research and they think that they do have facts.
Oh, by the way, for the rest of my co-hosts, guys, don't let me monopolize the conversation. If you have a question for Anthony, but feel free to jump in, because otherwise it'll just be a talk between me and him.
Okay, I'll jump in. So I guess, you could lead a person to realize that they're not seeking factual information by asking them what credibility their sources have, right? Well, I shouldn't, that's kind of a blunt way of putting it, but, how do you know these sources are valid, right? Because sometimes people don't even realize they're picking ridiculous sources for their information, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
You don't know where they're coming from until you engage with them, and a lot of times we just assume that we know where they're coming from, and it's so much better to just like try to meet them where they're at, because they maybe even often don't even know where they're at.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I want to call it in a nutshell, like Socratic dialogue, where you're asking, I don't want to say leading questions, but questions that invoke thought in terms of, how they answer, right? To lead them to their own, I guess, self-criticism, right? If that makes sense.
Ideal. And there's a fine line between asking a really good question and asking a leading question.
Yeah, that's how, I didn't want to use that. That's why I said, because leading questions suggest that you have a presupposition on what you expect them to say, whereas that kind of Socratic type approach, when you ask them a question about why they believe what they believe in a broader sense,
Ideally, if people detect that you're asking leading questions, it's going to cause defensiveness. And
double down effect, right?
Yeah, that could happen.
Yeah.
You're giving away the game that you want to bring them to your conclusion. And when we're doing SE, as tempting as it might be to want to do that, we really try to advise people not to do that, because it could raise defensiveness, and you could be leading them to a conclusion that they're not going to find compelling whatsoever. So it's far better to let
Yeah.
them do the driving and you try to be the passenger and just like ask them, well, why did you turn that way? And why did you decide to brake? And, ask them how they're determining where to turn and why they're driving the way that they're doing. I think
Yeah.
that's far
Yeah.
better.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So, do you believe that there's anybody who is too far gone or beyond reasoning? And if so, what does that look like?
Good question.
Yeah, really good question. I tend to be more optimistic that everyone's reachable. It's just a matter of how much time you want to spend with them. And I was at this mind body convention last weekend with another SEer named Mark Solomon. He's got this podcast called Being Reasonable and a really good YouTube channel. He just uploaded a video with a young girl who believes in dragons and fairies, and he uses SE with her masterfully.
Wow.
But we were there, and every table, crystals, people holding rocks. They had a bowl that they would put on a person's back and wave and run this like a mortar and pestle, like this thing through it and generating this vibration. I was surrounded by this, and there was one lady who sat down with us, and she may have been too far gone. I mean, you would ask her the simplest question, and it was this most convoluted reasoning. And I just, at the end of it, I was exhausted after like a 10-minute talk with them, because the amount of time it would take to really kind of start from the basics and build up and see how they're reasoning about the world would take so much effort. So even that person, I think, is reachable. It would just take a lot of patience and time. And I didn't have it in the moment, but I still think that person was reachable. The thing is, would they be willing to sit through 10 conversations with me where we can eventually get to the point where they were reflecting reasonably about their beliefs?
Yes.
I don't know that. I mean, you can chip some people. They read Dawkins and right away
Clicks.
or they get a hitch slap upside the head kind of thing, right? And I think some people take more time, and so you're, regardless of whether that conversation was successful, right? It's still, I think, chipping away at the armor. And I was going to say, in terms of like doubling down on beliefs, the smarter the person, the more likely they are to do that. If you read like Shermer and the Believing Brain, you can easily come up with justifications for your belief, right? And when you're confronted, you will double down. Yeah. And I'm sure that New Agey woman probably said to you, "You're just not open-minded." Did you say
maybe.
that?
And I don't know if she maybe she was super intelligent. That's completely possible. And she just,
or not, to be
or
fair.
maybe she wasn't, or maybe she
Yeah.
was just highly imaginative, and the value she gets from thinking the beliefs far outweigh the truth of it. Like we meet a lot of people when we're doing SE, they don't really care if it's true or not. They get value from it, and that's good enough for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's a hard one to argue because I've done debates, and when people say I love my religion because it brings me comfort, well, I have no argument against that. There's nothing to argue there. Like, okay, there's all kinds of other reasons that I can criticize argument or religion and the arguments and justification for it. But when somebody says it gives my life meaning and it helps me through tough stuff, well, I have nothing to say about that. I think it's false and all that kind of stuff, but
I believe it was your fiancé that once says, "Yeah, so does heroin." That doesn't mean
I know exactly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I don't care as long as they're not trying to force
Yeah.
their shit on me. I don't care. If it brings them comfort and makes them do good things, fine.
The way I see it, though, I don't think the conversation's over. Like, you can still explore their conclusion that that the value is good enough for them.
Yeah.
Then you can start exploring the potential downsides. There you go. So that you can explore the potential downsides of putting value over truth with them. But some people are still they're just content with ignorance.
Yeah, but like I said, you're chipping away. Some people it takes years, and the more they hear something repeated, the more they start to let go of their dearly held beliefs, I guess, right?
Speaking of chipping away, that was my question. Is there a time factor in this, Anthony? I mean, if a person has a belief X and holds that belief X over time, does that belief necessarily get stronger and more difficult to break down?
That's a really good question that I hope one day can be tested. I sort of went out to test that when I shifted from the university campuses with the younger students, and when I went to the trails to talk to older people. I was thinking that maybe the older people would be more entrenched and less likely to reflect and change their minds. And I didn't really notice much of a difference. In
Mm.
fact, it could be argued that at least the people that were going to the trail to possibly like exercise and maybe think things through, maybe they were being a little bit more open-minded in the later years of their life and sort of reflecting on things. So I don't know if there's really, it's really hard to say. I mean,
Because this
don't
is
know.
a hypothesis. It's only worth what I'm thinking here. But let's take religion for example. You know, it seems to me the best time for somebody to shed their belief in religion is when they're entering that rebellion phase. You know, of their teen years. You know, because the fight the man and everybody's got that attitude, as compared to somebody who's in their 60s have been a strong believer all their life. You know, because at that point that belief is comfort. But when you're a kid, you don't have that much attachment to it, and you already have a rebellious mindset. So maybe it's a lot easier to break down these arguments or let him or her see their own flaw, I guess, in their argument when they have a specific mindset. But like I said, it's only worth my
Yeah.
opinion.
It would be worth exploring. Like, I don't even think you necessarily have to be going through a rebellious phase. Like, I'm thinking of my kids now going away to college.
Mm.
They're now being exposed to way more diversity than they did here in our own town. Being challenged by teachers, their minds are being challenged on a daily basis. And I would imagine that most students who are in that situation, even if they're not rebelling, they're in a situation where they're constantly being taught to think critically
Mhm.
about things. It might be one of the reasons why a lot of religions don't like to send their kids to universities, and they lament the fact that they don't believe anymore after universities. I think it's possibly like the habit of being more of a responsible thinker when you're at a university might cause you to start questioning all the beliefs that you have.
Mm. Interesting. Interesting. Anthony, here's the problem I have with. I mean, don't get me wrong. You're a master of street epistemology and much better than I could ever be at it. But this is where I run into problems because
Mhm.
let's say, for example, let's take an argument here. Let's talk about this argument I just had with this friend of mine who I believe she's probably an anti-vaxxer now, unfortunately. And she told me, like I said, she made the argument that the flu kills more people that COVID did. And if I was to talk to her and say, okay, walk me through how you figured that out, which would probably be a good first step to take, right?
Mhm.
Right. And then she would quote something from, I don't know, Breitbart. Let's just say Breitbart for the sake of argument. And this is like complete bullshit, right? Because at that point, my tendency is to go and say, look, here's a site that basically shows that Breitbart is full of shit, right? This is a site that evaluates media, and it shows that Breitbart is not reliable. Why do you listen to that? Is that a good way to go? Or do you really think am I still pushing my thing here on this point?
It's not a good way to go.
I'm doing
What
it right.
Well, I mean, you would think that it is the way to go because, like, she went to Breitbart. You would want to point out that is not a reliable source as judged by this other entity. More than likely, they will say, "Well, yeah, maybe there's some things on the site that aren't good, but this article was accurate." They're going to probably find a way to just dismiss what you're saying. It would probably be better to say, like, "Okay, if Breitbart put out another article about the vaccine that totally contradicted the first one, would you be willing to accept it?" Now, whether they say yes or no, it's really useful because if they say, well, yes, then you know that the content of the article is the thing that's causing them to sway. If they say no, then the Breitbart article has nothing to do with it.
Mm.
So it's really tempting to just like shoot down the quality of their resources or their reasoning. What you should do is lean into it more. And that would be one way to go. There's other ways you can go with it too, but
So it was to me at this point to determine if she is basically just ranting this because it's she just has a thing for Breitbart, for example, then essentially she's not being intellectually honest in the conversation. She's just saying, doesn't matter what you say, as long as Breitbart says it, that's what I'm going to believe.
She may say, right, if she says, yeah, I mean, you have to go where they take you. So again, if she said like, yeah, if Breitbart put out a correction to that article, then I would lower my confidence in this position, which I'd be really surprised if they said that. And then you can figure out, well, what was in the article? What was the claim in the article that they found so convincing? And it might be the number of deaths in this state compared to this state, or you have to dig a little bit into the minutia. But more than likely, what you're going to find is that reason has nothing to do with it. It's probably like, well, when it really comes down to it, I'm really afraid of needles or something. You might be surprised what really is at the heart of these beliefs. And it is very rarely the first reason that a person will give. So you need to ask questions to see if that is the reason why they're so entrenched in their view.
That is very interesting.
Does that help, or did that confuse things more?
No, it helps. It helps. You just got to give my slow brain a chance to process it.
Well, and I think it might be worthwhile to encourage people to understand what a media diet is, and that you should be, consuming media from a variety of sources, particularly those that don't back up your usual reasoning, right?
Yes.
That's
That
important.
does help. That does help. But there's a question. There's somebody put together a survey. This guy Nathan Ferguson and others. His channel is Abstract Activist, and I think it's question 18. He asks people like, do you strongly agree or strongly disagree that that I regularly seek out information from the other side? And almost everyone puts agree, but in reality, we don't. Like I'm thinking about myself even. I like to think that I occasionally go to Fox News or Breitbart to look at that type of stuff, but I really don't. I'm usually hearing about the crappy things that they're saying and doing. So I think it takes a real special, dedicated person to do what you're suggesting. I wish people would do that more.
Yeah.
It's usually what we bump into as well, right? I mean, so somebody says, for example, if you somebody, let's say they listen to Breitbart, and I said to them, what if I showed you a study from the CBC? Maybe for American listeners, how do we say this? From CNN, let's say CNN, and that contradicts that Breitbart article. Would you be willing to take a look at it? Which is, you kind of leading on slightly here. But this person is most likely to answer no, because it's a liberal thing. Or
because
whatever.
it's CNN, right? So you were heading in the right direction with that question, but you got too specific.
Okay.
So a better question would be like, well, what would you accept to change your mind about the Breitbart article? Don't give them things to consider. Ask them what they would consider. Otherwise, you're just going to be throwing up things that you're tossing it up, and they're just cranking it out of the park every time. Meaning, no, they're going to just reject it. It's much better to say, like, well, what pitch are you looking for here? What exactly?
It's really hard not to explain to people that all media is biased, right? All media is biased. And what we see nowadays is not journalism. We're seeing op-eds that are passing off as news.
I know. Where's the news? Like,
yeah.
Then I wonder if it was even there. Was it even there 20 or 30 years ago?
Well, I mean, look at, respected figures like Walter Cronkite and, even back in the day. I
mean, in the States, there was something that happened during the Reagan years where he basically destroyed deregulated media, the FAIR Doctrine, I believe it was called, in media, where essentially it wasn't about news having to show both sides of a story. It was show whatever you want. And of course, all these news outlets start to show what pays off, what's more lucrative. And this is what gave rise to guys like Newt Gingrich and Fox News down the road. And now we've basically reached the pinnacle.
I think I know what you're talking about, Kevin. And I think that was in the 80s. And there was a team of journalists, partner of journalists kind of thing. They went to work for Fox News. And they tried to get them to, fit a narrative kind of thing. And I think it came to, this is, I think, the case you're talking about. And what it came down to is that it's not illegal to lie. And this is why we don't have news sources anymore. They're called media outlets. That's why that term exists, because they're not news anymore. You know what I mean? You can't journalistic standards are just not there.
Yeah.
You know?
And what's
Yeah.
interesting between our two countries, our two respective countries here, is in Canada, we did not deregulate the media like the United States did.
Yeah.
So essentially, fake news is essentially an American phenomenon. However, the thing is we've gutted these news outlets so much at this point that when something happens in Texas, for example, the CBC up here cannot afford to send one of their journalists down there to report on what's going on. So they pick up the phone and call CNN. Or they pick up the
Yeah.
phone and call NBC and say, "Hey, what's going on down there?" So so this is how fake news, quote unquote, whether it's CNN or Fox or whatever, or biased news, I should say, is transported from the United States into other countries.
Well,
This is
and
an American
you know,
phenomenon.
we don't get a free freaking pass on that, you know?
No, no, of course not.
Our,
Of
you
course
know, our journalistic standards are, you know, explicit and written out, you know, in a more whatever kind of way kind of thing. But yeah,
was still there, you-
letting bullshit through. If you're, you know, as a journalist, you're obligated to not let bullshit through. Sorry,
Yeah.
that's your job, right? You know, you can say things like alleged, and there's all kinds of language to, you know, describe a situation without implicating guilt and all that kind of stuff, right? But it's not your job to defend the government. It's your job to be a watchdog, right? This is freedom of the press. It's a foundation of democracy, and we just don't have that. You know, better here, to be fair, Kevin, but not great. Not
No, no,
great.
I agree.
Not at
great.
all. Yeah,
Not
biased
great.
and full of bullshit. Yeah.
I believe it was Al Gore who basically said it best. He said the fifth estate, the journalism is the immune system of a democracy. If that goes bad,
Yeah.
then you end up with a sick country. And I
Mhm.
believe you're correct on that. Anthony, for the lay person, I mean, you're a master at doing this kind of arguing and talking people into seeing their own mistakes there. But for the base guy, you know, I'm an idiot. So talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. How do I start these conversations? How do I approach these people? What kind of attitude do I take? Can you give me a nice little step-by-step basic guide to epistemology?
Yeah, there's two ways to approach it, and there's the mindset that you bring to it, and then there's like actually starting one. So like starting with the mindset, set aside the desire to win or crush your opponent. Really try to put yourself in a frame of understanding. Like you can even tell yourself, like, this wacko believes this. Why? I want to understand why they believe this. Okay, so put yourself into a mind of curiosity, and you know, set aside the name calling. You know that's not helpful, but like really try to put yourself in a mind frame. Like I want to understand how they came to that conclusion. That's the first part, and then the other part is, well, how do you start it? And you could wait for the person to make a claim,
Mhm.
or you can be like, okay, you know, the next time I'm alone with this person, I want to ask them about why they think that this is true. So you can. This is one of the biggest challenges about doing SE is starting it. Putting yourself in the right mind frame is difficult for a lot of people, but
Mhm.
it's possible. The more difficult part is like actually doing it. So there's a couple of different suggestions that I have. You could tell them that I want to try an approach called street epistemology, or if it's okay with you, can I ask you a series of questions to really explore how you're thinking about this? And if at any point you don't like it, or you want to ask me questions in return, you can do that. That's one thing that you can do.
Mhm.
Another thing is you could just sort of slyly slip into a mode where you're asking questions, but if they know you, they're going to detect that your approach is different than what you've been using. Why is Kevin all of a sudden asking me all these questions? It's going to look weird. What else can you do?
So if they know me, so I should yell at them first, then ask questions, right?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, ideally there's no yelling. Another thing you could do is you can teach them this approach. Maybe show them a video, or um, share your excitement about an approach that really helps people reflect on their beliefs. In my view, honesty is the best policy. I've discovered this way of questioning beliefs that really tends to result in people thinking about their views.
Mhm.
You have a very interesting view to me. In fact, I suspect that you're even mistaken about it. You can lay all your cards out on the table. You don't have to be sneaky about it.
Really?
Yes, it might raise defenses. I get that. But in my view, it's much better to just be honest and say, like, I love you, Mom, but I think you're wrong on this. And I think if you're willing, I'd love to explore it together. And if you want to ask me questions in return afterwards, we can do it. Are you cool with that? Now you've gotten the unusualness of what you're about to do out of the way. You've set expectations. I think that that's far better with a loved one or a friend than just like sneakily sliding into asking SE questions, because they're going to detect something's off. One of the last videos that I uploaded on my channel before I started uploading videos, before I stopped uploading videos for a while, is a guy who he's an older guy who was going to the university and came up to me, and he realized that his wife is a young earth creationist who started teaching their kids this literature.
Oh, Jesus.
And he immediately he watched a few SE videos and started SEing her basically. And she immediately, what are you doing? I feel like you're manipulating me. These aren't the typical questions that you ask me. And it just blew up in his face. So I think it's far better just to lay all your cards out on the table, because you want to have a willing, trusting conversation partner. And if they're suspicious about how you're approaching their belief, that's not good. It's not going to help those questions that you end up asking land. You need to be on the same page. It's one of the hardest things, though, is getting, it's almost better if you don't know the person and it's a stranger who's asking the questions, because we tend to give strangers much more leeway in how they interact with us than somebody that we know.
But this is also assuming this person is actually intellectually honest in their belief as well. Because if somebody, for example, was just a propagandist, for lack of a better term, putting your cards on the table is just not going to work with this person anyway.
Well, that's true. You may get somebody who's like, aha, see, I knew you had some ulterior motive. There's always the uncharitable conversation partner that's out there. They're always going to be out there.
I was going to add, it's a matter of trying to steel man your opponent, but do you know what I mean? Like, I shouldn't say opponent. That's not the right word for this engagement of discourse kind of thing, or discursive engagement, whatever you want to say, but to give them the benefit, like you say, what is that called? The most charitable interpretation of their claims, right? Steel manning them, and that empowers them to think, if that makes sense, as opposed to it feeling more confrontational.
Yeah, that
make
helps.
sense? Yeah.
That'll help.
Yeah.
Most people appreciate that if you can like really listen to them and repeat back what you're hearing, that explains what they're saying even better and more accurately than what they're telling you.
Yeah.
So if you can repeat it back, and they said, the way that you phrase that is beautiful. Like, I couldn't have said it better myself. That's an indication that you're on the same page and you're communicating, and that you're building some trust there. Yeah. That's why those loaded or leading questions are the worst thing that you can do when you're talking with somebody that you disagree with.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Very interesting. I personally, like I said, I'm no expert at this, but I would have that. My tendency would be to use the curiosity approach. It's like, you really think dragons exist? Huh? I said, this is really, really interesting. It's like,
and don't fake it.
And you can't really fake it either, right? It's like,
you are a librarian, or you do my taxes. I'm really surprised that you hold these views. Are you willing to explore that? That's another thing, is you could ask them, would you be willing to let me ask you a couple of questions where we can explore this, respectfully, and try to uncover how you came to this belief? And then they may drop a stunner on you and say, well, when it really comes down to it, I don't even care if it's true or not. It just gives me peace of mind. And then it doesn't mean the conversation's over there either. You can still pursue that, like we talked about. But yeah.
That's very interesting. Because it seems to,
Sometimes it can be a harsh conversation too. Like when somebody's being messed over, right? For example, let's just say I have an acquaintance who pays a lot of money to a psychic. And the cat is talking to him. He hasn't quite learned how to talk to the cat yet. I'm just like, I just see you throwing money away on bullshit, and it's so fucking painful for me to see. Do you know, like, how to shut up? Like, I'm learning. I'm really trying hard to learn. Because I think, because I'm a lifer atheist, some of that Socratic stuff has just come naturally to me, just by virtue of being a curious child and wanting to question people about like they, why don't you believe in God? Well, why do you believe in God? Like, it's just like the things that come to the mind of a child kind of thing, right? But sometimes it's really hard to not drop a crumb, shall we say, and like plant the question, hey, are you being fucked over here? Right? To put it bluntly,
Yeah.
right?
Sometimes,
yeah.
depending on your relationship, brutal honesty can be really useful.
Or a way of losing that friendship too.
you could jeopardize it, right?
Yeah.
That's a risk. You could say,
Yeah.
you could even
Yeah.
lead with that. Like, I think it's even better to be like, let me get my camera going again. You can even like lay your cards, lay it all on the table. Like, I love our friendship. I get so much value from it. And the last thing I want to do is hurt you.
Yeah.
However, I'm worried that you're being hurt. And would you be willing to explore this with me a little bit? And if at any point like you feel like I'm hurting you or this is too painful and you want to stop, just like tell me to stop. But as your friend, like I'm really worried that you're being taken advantage of. And that's the last thing I want to have happen to you. And we might even find better ways for you to cope with, or find more value than you're getting from this current way that you're doing it. Maybe there's even a better way of getting through the difficulties of your life than what you're doing here.
Yeah.
That
I tried to, like, because sometimes it's just not going to be successful, and I think you just have to leave people be, right? I hate to see this person throwing away money on a psychic who always has some other thing to add to the tab, so to speak, right? This is not covered by Alberta healthcare or, or universal healthcare system. Right? You can get real counseling, right? It's really hard to shut up.
Christine, Cat Talk 101 is if you want to talk to a cat, you must ingest a can of tuna first. So your tuna will get the cat's attention. And then
I'll let him know. I'll let my friend
know. In all seriousness, it might be in all seriousness, it might be fun to just explore with them. Like, tell me a little bit about the value that you're getting from talking with this psychic.
Ooh,
and what is actually happening. Like, what was your last instance like? Like, what did they tell you? What did you take it as? And how did you see it help you in life?
Yeah, I should have done that. That's what I should have done. And I tried, but I mean,
it's hard.
It is really hard. And I can't have those conversations with that person anymore because it's just going to upset them. Right.
Sure.
And that is a failure on me to engage properly and essay, right? Or Socratic dialogue kind of thing. Well, it could be one of those things that chips away, and eventually, they'll see that they're throwing money away to a psychic who constantly has something more to add to make them better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ridiculous. It's hard to shut up.
Sorry.
It's hard to shut up. Yeah. Now, I'll shut up now. Your turn.
I'm also assuming that there are some people that I wouldn't say they're unreachable, but they're just not reachable in this moment right now, right? I mean, for example, I used to have an ex-girlfriend. I used to go see this talk a psychic, like Christine was talking, and I went to one of the sessions with her, and the psychic had this weird thing. She had a whole bunch of nice-looking stones, and she would make you pick a stone, and then she would read the stone. The stone would be a fortune of some kind. And the girlfriend at the time was worried about her mother that was being sick. And at the end of the session, the psychic said, "Do you have any more questions?" And she basically said, "Well, I'm really surprised you didn't tell me anything about my mother being sick and all that." "Oh, pick another stone," right? It's like, at that point, I'm rolling my eyes so hard you can hear the noise in my head. But she was just not ready to see that at that point. So is it true that a good street epistemologist also knows when he or she has to walk away from a conversation, you're not ready for this at this point?
Ooh, good question.
You do this on this show, right?
Yeah, I think you do. I think you do start to learn the limits of people, that they're just not ready for the questions you want to ask. What I think could be really useful though is go broader. So rather than talking about the specific, the rocks or in your case, Christine, the psychic, you can have a broader discussion about like, what does it mean to have good evidence, or do you even care if your beliefs are true, or how might a person figure out that they're being taken advantage of? Let's just have a broader discussion about that. That
Yeah,
could be helpful
yeah.
talking broader.
But
That
but
one, you're not touching the sensitivity of the actual belief.
yeah, um, I guess. But how do you? Yeah, I can't talk to that person anymore about that because
I get it.
I just upset him.
I
I'm
get
not
it.
making him think anymore. I've upset him, and
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
conversation is done, right?
So,
But I obviously chipped away at something,
Mm-hmm.
so
right?
here's a
Yeah.
question then. In Christine's specific case, there's been damage done here.
Yep.
Is there a way to slowly recuperate? We're slowly bringing it back without necessarily raising the person's shields up, right? Is there a
I
way?
don't want to.
Oh well, okay,
She
fair
doesn't even
enough.
Yeah.
want to bring it
No, I
up.
don't want to. This is,
No, but let's
yeah,
say a
yeah.
situation where you did want to recuperate this person as a friend or something like that, or give it a second shot. Is there a way to gently approach this person, say, let's have another crack at it?
It's easier said than done because there are people in my life who I don't know if I would even take the same advice I would be giving. Because like, ideally it would be like pulling them aside or calling them up on the phone and saying, I know we've argued in the past. This relationship is valuable to me, and I'm willing to set aside this belief that we disagree on just so that we can get along. But that takes, that takes commitment to do. You have to really value the relation to do that. And then you have to also stick with what you said. And even if they agree, it's going to probably still be awkward. It's almost easier to just step away from relationships and respect their boundaries and hope that maybe somebody else comes along that can engage with them where they don't trigger them in the way that you probably did.
Mm.
Yeah, because I did try to, we had a conversation and, the next day I'm like, I hope you didn't take this personally. We were just having an academic debate about blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, I took it personally, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, then I can't engage with you on that level anymore. And that makes
Yeah.
me feel like I disrespected that person. And that makes me feel bad in a way, right? But I can't engage anymore, right? I just can't because
It's tough.
yeah,
Ideally, more people learn about an SE type of approach where you're exploring the technique that they're using to get to their conclusions rather than the topic itself, because the beliefs that people have get so ingrained with their identity. Just questioning rocks or crystals or psychics, for example, they're so invested in it that just suggesting that you question it could just topple them because you're not questioning them.
Yeah, and so okay, I'll have to relay another story about psychics then. Oh my God.
Psychic hour, that's
So,
right.
so when my daughter was in elementary school, I would have lunch with some of the moms, and they believed some kind of weird shit, which was an eye opener to me. But anyway, one was like, "Well, I've got this great psychic, and you should see her," and blah 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 blah. And I'm just like, no. And, my friend was like, well, I'll pay. And I'm just like, no, because you've already told her about her. So she already knows all the things, right? Like, of course she's going to know me. And it's all the same shit. It's about love, or it's about money, or it's about your health, or I don't know. It's all the same. Just like when you open a fortune cookie, it's all the same shit to me, right? Just making shit up that fits to every situation, right? And, yeah. So
Hold on a second. So if I understand right, they offered to have you go through it, and you said no, I don't want to do it.
even though they offered to pay, because of course they'd already primed the psychic because the person knew me, and even I'm sure the first question the psychic would have asked, "Do you believe in psychics?" And I'd be like, "No," and she'd find a way to
Yeah.
right?
This is the exact same. This is the exact same thing you get from believers who say, all you need to do is read the book,
Yeah, I
or
know.
hear.
Oh, all you
In
have to do
fact,
is visit my psychic, right?
when I was
Oh,
when I
my
was at this
psychic, right.
conference, when I was at this conference, there was a lady who she offered me Lee Strobel's book, Case for Christ. It's like the 20th time it came up. But rather than just saying no, what I found is saying, like, is that the thing that you found convincing? Or, in the case of them offering you for the psychic, you could say, before I think it's really generous that you offered the psychic to me. It's obvious that you think that
Yeah.
there's some value there. However, I'm not convinced it's real. I would first need to understand how you determined
Mm.
that there's something to it before I'd want to even engage with it. So, can you take me through how you're confirming that there's even anything to this psychic stuff? And
Yeah.
now you're talking about their methodology and not psychics. You're talking about how they're verifying that psychism is even a thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's far, but we don't
So
normally
I
know.
remember, like,
We're not taught to do this stuff.
No, we're not.
and it's interesting because having children was another catalyst for me learning about odd beliefs, shall we say. And so her daughter was over and said something pertaining to, a psychic reading or something. And my daughter just looked at me and she's like, Mom? I'm just like, yeah, it's okay. We don't believe that. And sorry, yeah, we don't believe that because it was weird, right? And then little girl said, who's about a year younger than my daughter, who would have been 7, 8 at that time. That's okay. It's okay that you don't believe. I'm just like,
Good.
yeah, good, but also good that my daughter kind of like, Mom, what the fuck is this about?
Yeah, I
You
think
know, and I think I have to say that I've probably been engaged in more Socratic type dialogue than because again, it came being a life or atheist, it just came naturally to me to say like, why do you believe what you believe, right? And I think I probably made a difference in a lot of cases, right?
nice.
Yeah.
I think
But in a lot of cases, I also mess things up a bit. But I think I planted seeds regardless. And sometimes, people. Here's another example. I have a friend, and she was saying something about um, it's getting really hard for me because I'm getting older to do blah, blah, blah kind of thing, right? Yard work and that kind of thing physically, right? I said, well, it's okay. Just give it 1 more minute every day. And by no time you'll have worked yourself up. It's just a matter of building your strength. Didn't hear from her for 2 weeks. And I didn't really think about it. And then she called me. I was so angry at you, Chris, for what you said. You really hurt my feelings. I did not want you to say that. I wanted you to, oh, I'm so sorry kind of thing. But you gave me a solution and you were right. So, like I've had a few stories like that, where just the truth and people, wow, you really pissed me off. But then they actually acted on it and like, yeah, she wasn't wrong.
How
So,
dare you give me the truth when I was really looking for comfort?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I think most married men know that line all too well.
Well, and this is my my own daughter would say that my discourse is masculine in that sense because I don't empathize. I look for solutions, right? And finding solutions can really piss people off sometimes when they just want to hug, and that's fair too. Been there, done that, and yeah.
I still think you missed a great opportunity. I would have gone to the psychic with a picture of a random person saying, "It's my father, my lost father. Can you tell me where he is?"
Oh well, there, we could do a whole show on cold reading, and I know just enough to not get fucked over. I don't know actually how to do it, professionally or anything like that. But like I said, there's certain narratives, love, health, wealth. These are fortune cookie, daily horoscope shit, right? But they're effective. They work. They're generic enough to apply to any situation to anybody, right? Oh, I see this in your love life. You blah 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 blah, right? Like, no, you don't. You don't fucking know what's going on in my life. You're just making shit up.
What I like is that one time that psychic told me, says, you're in grave danger. Something really bad's going to happen to you unless you're careful.
Great.
Okay, so something bad happens to me, you predicted it. If I'm careful and nothing bad happens to me, you predicted that too. That's a win-win, whichever way you look at it. Right? Anthony, thank you so much for all this, my friend. But before we let you go and all that, let's talk about you working on a small project about street epistemology. And maybe you'd be so kind to clarify a bit more on that. What's going on with street epistemology and what you're doing there?
Well, yeah, I shifted gears from going on in the street and doing conversations because of COVID, and then other people started doing it. But more broadly, we started a nonprofit organization called Street Epistemology International in 2019 with a couple of missions. We want to We want to find somebody to research what it is we're doing and study it in the lab to see if it's effective long term for helping people reflect and maybe even change their minds. And then we're developing a series of training materials to teach people how to do this. So there's going to be a self-directed course. I've got a meeting next week to talk to people about putting together a curriculum for kids to teach them how to do, not like SE, let me question your views, but a lot of the concepts that come up in an SE talk. And I mean, I've got a talk coming up with a large manufacturing company who wants to learn how to have more effective conversations. There's people in military who are interested in this, people in academia.
This sounds scary.
It's blowing up. So it's occupying a lot of my time, and I love it. I can't imagine working on anything more important. I mean, when you look around and see what's happening in the world today and how we're talking past each other, and it seems like we're on the verge of battles and wars.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any way out of this tailspin than to be doing what we're doing.
Wow, fantastic. And if people want to support your efforts and all that, where can they reach you, Anthony?
Well, I'm on Twitter. In my Twitter bio, there's a link to a Linktree link. Yeah, Troy, we can't hear you, by the way. You're muted.
Yeah, Troy, we
You're
can't
still
hear
muted.
you.
And I want to hear questions from Troy. Like, I didn't get many questions from
I
him.
know. I was kind of
Yeah, I can see him struggling to try.
But yeah, there's a Linktree link. We still can't hear you. But you got my YouTube channel, Twitter. I'm reachable. You can find me any platform. I even have a TikTok, but I don't do much with it.
Oh, well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Anthony, for all this. I really appreciate this. Before I let you go, I got to have you say, hi, this is Anthony Magnabosco, and I took a left in the valley.
Hi, this is Anthony Magnabosco, and I took a left at the valley.
Fantastic.